Hi everyone from sunny Orlando, Florida. I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I'm Linda Futch.
And this is the third in our series of topical weekly webinar sessions for BlendKit 2014 as we wrap up Week 3, Blended Assessments of Learning. With us today, as always, making sure that all runs smoothly as silk is our colleague John Pizzo. Also joining us online are our guest panelists, Dr. Beth Carlson and Professor Amy Mangrich, whom we will introduce more formally in a moment. First, just a comment that many of the 2,700 plus of the us who are BlendKit 2014 are having rich interactions with one another and sharing our work as examples for each other in a variety of contexts: public blogs, discussion groups in Canvas, participant-initiated LinkedIn group, all kinds of things. If you find yourself disconnected and want to be more connected, consider reaching out in one of these venues. We'll review some of the access points at the end of today's sessions. Right now, though, we'd like to see what you're thinking about this week's topic of designing assessments of learning in your blended courses. As in past weeks, we'll do this through 3 short polls. Please remember that if you are viewing the recording of this session, we consider you a participant as well, so please select the Access Polls link in the Web Links pod toward the bottom of your screen. It's prefaced with viewing the recorded sessions, Access Polls here. You may enter your poll responses and enter comments and questions, but remember not to hit submit until the end of the session. All right, so let's start with any preferences you might have for types of learning assessments regardless of course modality. So what types of assessments do you typically design? So if you haven't already filled out the polls, go ahead and do that now. Please select one answer, and if you choose it depends, please tell us a little bit more by providing a short elaboration in the chat room right here in Adobe Connect. We'll give a moment or two for people to finish submitting things and to type a few free responses. Thus far, it's looking like projects and authentic tasks are the predominant type of preferred learning assessment. Essays, not nearly as popular. It depends, making a pretty considerable showing there as well. And multiple choice quizzes and exams, some, right? Some. And it's interesting, Linda, because, you know, it seems like as we interact with all kinds of faculty and all kinds of disciplines here at UCF, I think that comes up a lot, but I see a lot of multiple choice tests.
Yep, we sure do, especially when classes get large. That's what people depend on.
Yes, that's interesting. So would love to hear your comments about class size versus assessment type as well. Perhaps you might type some thoughts about that in the chat room. All right, so let's go on to the second poll. As you are planning out your learning assessments for your blended course, which of the listed assessment methods are you thinking of incorporating in your blended courses? So you can select all that apply. And if you have thoughts other than the ones listed, select other, and then just type those ideas into our chat room here in Adobe Connect. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those. And it looks like a lot of projects, which kind of aligns with that first general preference of authentic assessment, but a lot of online quizzes and exams, Linda, as well, just like we observed. That may not be what people prefer,
and we have
but that's what we do.
We have somebody commenting saying it depends on the course topic and the level. Intro course is more convenient assessment, while the upper level theory is more courses, more reading.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. And a good little combination of online quizzes and exams and face-to-face quizzes and exams, but a lot more folks planning to do online than face-to-face quizzes and exams. Interesting. And finally, as you contemplate learning assessments for your blended course, what issues are emerging for you? What concerns do you have? Select all that apply to you. And again, if you have thoughts other than the ones listed, select other, and then just type those ideas into our chat room here in Adobe Connect. So let's take a look here. A lot of folks concerned about online cheating, which is interesting. A lot of folks planning to do online quizzes and assessments. A lot of folks concerned about online cheating. I find it fascinating that very few people are concerned with face-to-face cheating. Difficulty of creating cognitive, higher cognitive level multiple choice items. That's interesting. Also, the time commitment of grading. Interesting. Yes. And the time commitment of writing detailed assignment instructions, making a fair showing as well. Do note there that Leslie commented that K-12 very focused on authentic assessment, projects, teamwork, and so forth. And that's true. So in higher ed, we do tend to see a lot of those multiple choice exams, Linda, again.
Yeah, and then somebody else commented that they have a lot of face-to-face activities where they get some of their assessment as well.
Absolutely, which is a good point, that as we've talked about assessments, right, that assignments and assessments can be this murky co-constructed sort of a thing. Some folks assessment means exam. Some folks assessments means any number of assignments that might be given.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that, I think, in the housekeeping as well. Well, please let us introduce to you Dr. Beth Carlson from St. Petersburg College here in sunny Florida, and Professor Amy Mangrich, where it's not so sunny, I believe, today, at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Beth is an award-winning blended learning instructor and has extensive experience teaching face-to-face, online, and blended courses in American Sign Language and developmental writing. Amy holds a terminal degree, actually I think more than one, in the visual arts and routinely teaches blended and online courses, and Amy conducts workshops nationally on blended and online course redesign. So we have a series of questions that we've pre-selected from those that many of you have submitted online, and we will go through those in a systematic fashion, and then as any time allows, if you guys who are with us live want to submit some questions, we will try to get those as well. Those of you who are watching the recording, feel free to submit yours, and we are lagging a little bit in this, but we are trying to get those out, get some follow-up going with our guest panelists so that we can even have more responses to questions that are submitted after the fact. Okay, on to the first question. So this question came in: how do you make decisions about implementing authentic assessments versus traditional multiple choice or essay exams in your blended courses? Beth, why don't we start with you, and then we'll hear from Amy.
Hi everyone, welcome. As I think about this question, as you mentioned, Kelvin, the blurring of the lines between authentic assessment and multiple choice, besides activities with the students, understanding that this class is a Structure of American Sign Language class. So essentially it's a linguistics course and linguistics of American Sign Language. So it's important to have a lot of applied material, but the additional aspect of the linguistics of American Sign Language being a relatively new field since the 60s, the content is very heavy in the course. So as someone mentioned somewhere, maybe it was you, Kelvin, that the higher the level of cognitive load, I think, on the textbook material, I tend to make those more multiple choice questions that are based in the class. Essays come down really more to discussion forums, and those are online. So it really relates to the content for me. The practical application of the concepts, that too can be covered in multiple choice. So there's you know, to me it really relates mostly to the content of the material that I'm trying to assess. Does that make sense? Kelvin, did you hear me?
Hi Beth, this is Amy. I can follow up on that a little bit, unless you need to jump in, Kelvin. So, you know, I teach my own courses, but I also work with faculty from all different disciplines on my campus and at a lot of other institutions around the country. And what we generally talk about is something very similar to what you're saying, Beth, where the content itself provides the format for the assessment. So very often, I'll use my course as an example. Very often, I'll provide some content that's the contextualizing content for the unit or for the module, and that's usually much more factual. It's much more about, you know, route memorization, and then I will assess the students with an online multiple choice exam, and it's very low stakes. It's usually worth a very small percentage of the total module points. After I know that they know what's after I know that they know the content, then I ask them to make a higher order application in a discussion forum. So this usually entails going out and collecting additional, after they get the initial content, then they go out and collect something else. Maybe it's a web search. Maybe in my particular course, it may be a field trip to a specific location where there's public art. It may be finding additional resources through a library search or something like that. And then they take all this material that they've learned and apply it through a discussion assignment. And that authentic assessment takes place. And that's usually in the form of some sort of project or some sort of application.
Thanks very much, Beth and Amy. Glad to have Sam again on this end. Amy, appreciate you moving forward. So that's good. The combination of authentic assessment and exams. Hold on just a second. I think we've got two microphones going at the same time in here. Are we? Okay, good. We're back. Sorry. Thanks for tackling the topic of quizzes and exams versus authentic assessment and the relationship between that and discipline and so forth. Let's move on to the second item here. Could you provide some guidance on approaches and strategies that have worked for you, at least, in terms of fair assessment of student work? For instance, balancing assessment between face-to-face and online, designing assessments to discourage cheating. These are all, you'll notice, themes that came up in our polls today. So, Amy, could we start with you, and then we'll go to Beth?
Sure. So balancing face-to-face and online assessments, this has a lot to do with the activity that the students are completing or performing. So I don't have I don't, in my own particular courses, and this is what what we always recommend for other faculty, is that when you're looking at, we work with faculty using the backward design model, Wiggins and McTeague, and so what you're really thinking about is, okay, what is it that I want my students to know how to do or perform by the end of this module? And so in some cases, in other words, that dictates the kind of assignment or the kind of activity the students are going to be completing. And so once I know what kind of activity needs to be completed, then I can determine whether that is best used in a face-to-face course or whether that's best in an online course. So, so really I balance the face-to-face and the online based on the kind of activity that I want my students to perform, and that is based on the learning outcomes that I want them to be able to demonstrate by the time they're done with that module. Is that making sense what I'm saying? So really things are balanced out based on the kind of activity the students are completing.
Yeah,
I like. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say, Amy, I like what you said there about balancing. Specifically, it changes semester to semester depending upon the students in my class. I may put more emphasis on something that is online, and then I find that they need more time in class in terms of assessment. And they pretty much let me know, and because it's a very specific group, individuals who want to become interpreters, they have to team and they have to work together. So I allow a lot of collaboration, and I don't, I haven't, cheating has not really been an issue for me, but I think because they know that it's easy to find the answers to any of the questions on my tests, but the best answers are coming from the book. So I agree that it depends on the needs of the students and the activity that they're completing, as to how I go about that assessment issue and with cheating and then what is being required of them from that module that week.
And so really, in the end, what it is if you've got the assessments that are the most easy to cheat on in my courses and in most courses on our campus, they are the lowest stakes they're the lowest stakes. Yes. So they're online quizzes and that sort of thing. The assignments, the assessments that are the highest stakes are the ones in which the students are making applications, they're applying their own personal personal information. Yeah, exactly. So that's the kind of assessment that's very difficult to cheat on. It's almost impossible to cheat on that kind of assessment. And so that's the kind of assessment that is a large percentage of the overall course grade.
I would agree. That sounds a lot like my course as well. It's an individual performance versus, finding the right answer per se.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, Amy and Beth. We obviously transitioned a little bit into question 3, speaking about formative assessments. I wonder if you might elaborate a little bit on how that breaks out between online and face-to-face, though. The formative versus summative sort of assessment mindset that you were just speaking of. Beth, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think really that it relates to what kinds of assignments that I have in my class. The students in the class have sentence clauses where they actually analyze structures in American Sign Language. They have chapter quizzes from the books. The chapter quizzes are weekly. There is a final, and this is something that I've optionalized really. They can do a written, short researched essay, or then recently I've changed to the assignment to have a self-reflective analysis that requires a very high level of critical thinking about the application throughout the course. That I would consider, again, back to the issue of it's a personal self-assessment based on their ability to achieve the goals of the course and their progress throughout the course. I also have a group project where within the course midterm 4 or 5 people to a group have to select an aspect of the course, ASL linguistics, and then they present on it. So again, this is sort of an authentic assignment. This requires them to work together. I assess the course is not specifically a sign language course. It's really a linguistics course about sign language, but weekly we have video blogs that they have to do, so I can kind of tell what's going on in terms of their acquisition of the content that will then transfer to their use of the sign language. So that those video blogs, they have answers to questions, they sign back to me, and those come through on a video recording. And then we also have research articles that they do based on studies in sign language linguistics. So I don't know if I've answered that question thoroughly, but yeah, there are so many different types of assessments, and again, it relates to the task and the activity and the student, and what I'm asking of them, and how I assess their growth, as they're going along.
Thanks,
It's
Beth.
really interesting that you say that, Beth, because I have a similar situation in my courses, and I've seen this quite a lot. I've seen this implemented by a number of other faculty, where by particular class, we have longer-term modules. So we have weekly topics that they have this, very short online assessment and then a longer discussion assignment. But then after about 5 weeks, the students come into the face-to-face class and they perform some sort of in-class activity, and they also write a reflection based on some prompts of their growth and development over the past 5 weeks. And so that usually happens, every 5 weeks or so, and that's usually based around a face-to-face activity. And then at the end of the semester, they they do a digital reflection. And so it's sort of like it takes the form of a digital story in the fact that it has voiceover, it has images, but it really is designed to have the students look back and reflect on what they've learned through the semester. And they're able to do that through these periodic reflections that happen about 3 times through the semester in this face-to-face. And so this is just one example of how you could use sort of this summative assessment at the end of the semester with this final reflection, and have that build on or dovetail with a formative assessment that happens throughout the semester. The formative assessment, at least in terms of the final reflection, that's happening primarily in the face-to-face, and then the final summative assessment is happening primarily online, because this is an activity that they do, on their own. It's their own personal journey through the semester, and so that is then, created outside of class and submitted online.
Thanks very much, Amy and Beth. So we have just a few moments left together today, so let's turn our attention to at least one of the questions that was posted in real time via the chat room. So here it is here. So Elise asked, if quizzes are low stakes, we talked about this a little bit ago, if quizzes are low stakes, what ensures students complete them? For instance, does your LMS require completion before the next topic pops up? Beth, you want to comment quickly, and then Amy quickly on that?
I would, and here's would be my perspective on this. I've never had a concern, I've never had an issue with students not completing them. I think there's a degree of competition within the classroom, particularly because they will eventually graduate and become interpreters, and I very rarely have students who don't complete them. I think as well, because they are based on, these are the quizzes now that come straight from the textbook, because they are based on the textbook, the students like them because they can search for the answers while they're reading, and then they also can search through the PowerPoints. So I don't typically have a lot of students who don't turn in their quizzes.
Okay, Amy?
Yeah, I don't usually have this problem either. I'm sort of always amazed that I can administer a quiz, and the quiz could be worth literally 1% of their final grade. But because it's called a quiz, they will, make sure that they get it done, and if they don't get something right, they'll, argue the answer and that sort of thing. So in some way, the whole, even if it's low stakes, the fact that it's a quiz in their minds actually does mean something. So I usually don't have that problem.
Amy, can I tag on that a minute too? I wanted to mention as well, with the quizzes, the students, if they get below a 70, they are allowed a retake. And a lot of times what I find is that they'll come in with a question that was on the quiz and say, I missed this one, and I'm not really sure why I missed it, and then we can discuss it. And that, I think that benefits everyone in the class, but they are allowed a retake if they get below a 70. But I would rather see students master the content than just be fighting for their grades, and they know that, and so I do give them opportunities to, if they do very poorly on something, to revise and resubmit.
And just one more point, because this was part of the question. I don't use any sort of setup within our course management system that allows students to complete so much before they move to the next topic. Although we do have folks on our campus who are doing that sort of thing. We use Desire to Learn as the learning management system, and we have a project on our campus called UPace, where students, and this is for courses like Intro to Psych and things like that, where there's a lot of material that needs to be covered, where the instructor does set up the whole course so that the students have to complete online assessments to a certain percentage, like 85 or 90% before they can move to the next module. And so it is something that is being done. It's not as common, but it is something that, depending on your learning management system, can be set up.
Yeah, and to support what Amy says, I do not use a system that, the next aspect of the unit opens up once the prior assignment is completed. The students, although they have an order for each module per se, the assignments are numbered. Sometimes they jump around, and that's kind of a learning style. I let them go through the modules however they want to do that, but I don't really like tying it into, you must complete this or you must receive this grade before you move on. Because I think that locks you to a lockstep sequence to go through the modules. That's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, thanks very much, Beth and Amy. That was a robust discussion around just a very few questions, and just rich, right? I'm sure that all of our BlendKit 2014 participants have appreciated that. Now, if you have any other questions, and we have some that have popped up in the chat, Linda and I are going to compile those and forward them on to Beth and Amy, and we're hoping that Beth and Amy will be willing to get some responses back that we can then distribute out to everyone in the next week or two. And it takes a little bit of time at this time of year. The follow-up to previous sessions, for instance, are still in the works. Meanwhile, we're really short on time today because our panel went a little long today. But Linda, I'm sure there are a number of logistical details in which we should touch base. Can you lead us through those?
Okay, let's see if I can't do this really fast. First of all, please don't forget the Week 3 feedback form. It's in the Canvas course at the end of Module 3. And if you need to contact us directly, there's still the BlendKit@ucf.edu. We do pay attention to this feedback so that we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of our participant. Okay, some of the Week 3 feedback is pretty much the same as last week. The one big thing that changed was the feedback about social networking. People seem to be more interested in it. So the screen you're seeing, the slide right now, has a bunch of links to the different social networking. So we're going to leave that on for just a moment. Some questions that came in about the DIY projects. There seemed to be some confusion last week. You only needed to send in one assignment or one quiz, not the whole thing. Also, next week you'll be sending us module content. Again, it's just one module, not all of your modules, and that might equate to roughly 1 week. You will also find a blended course integrations chart this coming week, and we're trying to help you organize your thought before you start writing your content. Week 3 and 4 in particular are designed to help you think through your integration between your face-to-face classes and the online content. Integration is one of the key issues in a blended course, how to make that face-to-face and online classes flow together seamlessly. So as you're creating this content, think about how your online content can be articulated to help you make this seamless environment. Some suggestions from my personal experience and from other blended faculty is, one, I prefer to put all my assignments online. That means that the students constantly have access to them, and it also tracks what they've done, so there's no question about what's happening. Number 2, in regard to module content, at the very minimum, I like to put in a transition that guides the students from what they're doing between the face-to-face and the online environments, but also kind of helps them track what they're supposed to be doing.
And Linda, just a quick interjection on that point. When we say module in BlendKit 2014, we can mean content, truly content, or it could just be that introduction to assignments and the ability of to turn those in as kind of a hub, right? So it doesn't have to be that there's lectures online necessarily.
Correct.
It could be a variety of approaches to modules.
That's correct. It's however you want to design your class. The second question that came in last week was, why do we have the webinar at the end of the week? Well, it's so that you can dig into that material before you actually start hearing from the guest speakers, and also so you can come up with questions for the guest speakers. So if you want to do assignments after the guest speakers, that's totally all right. If you've already done that, feel free to resubmit. Okay, later today you'll be receiving an email message from us guiding you on what to do or how to get the most out of week 4. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions coming in. I'll let Kelvin watch for that, and we'll get to those questions if they come in. I don't want to forget about mentioning the UCF EduCall certificate. If you've been doing the DIY projects, then you're a strong candidate for the certificate. Remember, you have to complete the BlendKit course, and you have to submit a portfolio. And on screen, you're going to see the URL to actually sign up for that. Looking towards next week, we're going to be talking about blended content and assignments, and we have Dr. Debbie Haas-Bond from the College of Education at the University of Central Florida, and Dylan Barth will be back from the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. I got those backwards. So we hope you'll join us for that session. Thanks very much today to our presenters. Thank you to Dr. Beth Carson and Professor Amy Mangridge, and then also to our John here helping us along. Okay, if Kelvin and I can be of any help in this week, please feel free to email us. We'd be happy to help. This is your course. Go out there and get it and make it a good one. Have a great week.